Welcome to the hardest working committee, the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Assemblyman Carter.
Present.
Assemblyman DeLong.
Present.
Assemblyman De Silva.
Here.
Assemblywoman Duran. Assemblywoman Gonzalez. Assemblyman Gurr. Assemblyman Hibbets. Assemblyman Koenig. Assemblyman MacArthur. Assemblyman Nguyen. Assemblywoman Taylor. Assemblywoman Thomas. Chair Torres.
And I believe today's almost a holiday here in the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs because I believe it's Local Government Day. And obviously that's an important day here for the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs. So we're definitely appreciative of all the work that our local governments do from city to counties to represent our communities. Welcome to the audience here in Carson City, those joining us in Las Vegas and those joining us by video conference. Just a couple housekeeping items. Please remember to silence your electronic devices. If you wish to testify, please sign in at the table by the door and provide a business card to the committee secretary. For those joining online, please be sure to mute your microphone when you're not speaking. When testifying, please turn on the microphone and clearly state your name, spell your name, and state your affiliation, if any, for the record. And then turn off the microphone each time you are done speaking. We expect courtesy and respect in our interactions during the meeting, even if we do not agree with another person's position. Committee members will be using their laptops to view handouts and other documents. Please do not view this as a sign of disrespect or inattention. Public comment will be taken at the end of the meeting. Each person will be limited to 2 minutes. In addition, the public may submit written testimony to the committee up to 24 hours after the hearing. We are going to go ahead and go out of order today, so we're going to go ahead and begin with AB 366. At this time, I'll go ahead and open up the hearing on AB 366, which is a committee bill, but will be presented today by Assemblyman De Silva. Is there somebody else we're waiting for? All right, please begin when you're ready.
Good morning, Chair Torres and committee members. I am Ruben De Silva, representing Assembly District 28 in Clark County. Thank you for the opportunity to present Assembly Bill 366, which revises provisions governing the Keep Nevada Working Task Force. I'm going to start with some background before providing an overview of the bill before the committee today. During the 2021 legislative session, Chair Torres requested AB 376, which was co-sponsored by several other legislators, including 3 members of the committee, Assemblywoman Duran, Gonzalez, and Thomas. Assembly Bill 376 was a comprehensive bill to support the immigrant community, but for the purposes of this bill presentation, I will focus on the provisions of the 2021 legislation that created the Keep Nevada Working Task Force within the Office of the Lieutenant Governor. The task force was charged with developing strategies to support current and future industries across Nevada and conducting research on ways to strengthen career pathways for immigrants. The task force was further charged with supporting the efforts of business and others to provide workforce stability and recommending approaches to attract and retain immigrant business owners. One of the provisions of the 2021 legislation required the task force to submit a written report to the Director of Legislative Counsel Bureau for submission to the Legislative Commission on or before July 1st, 2022. While the task force is currently required to meet at least once each quarter, it held 5 meetings in 2022. March 15th, May 2nd, June 29th, September 30th, and December 14th. And it just held its first meeting of 2023 on March 27th. The task force set forth various recommendations in its annual report dated July 1st, 2022. During my short time as a legislator, I have learned that it often takes several sessions to continue to build upon the foundation provided by our predecessors, and in this case, our chair. Assembly Bill 366 moves the Keep Nevada Working Task Force from the Office of the Lieutenant Governor to the Office of the Secretary of State and revises the membership of the task force. The bill increases the number of members on the task force from 9 to 10. Currently, the 9 members of the task force consist of the Lieutenant Governor or his designee, 7 members appointed by the Lieutenant Governor, and 1 member appointed jointly by the governor and the Office of New Americans. The bill reconstitutes the task force with 1 member being the Secretary of State or his designee, 8 members appointed by the Secretary of State, and 1 member appointed by the Lieutenant Governor. The bill also changes the criteria for appointment to the task force, as indicated on the table we provided to help visualize the changes proposed. Section 9 of the bill allows the members of the task force who are serving on July 1st, 2023, to continue serving until the Secretary of State appoints members. There is nothing to prohibit the Secretary of State from appointing an existing member if the person meets the qualifications for appointment set forth in AB 366. The duties of the task force remain the same. However, subsection 2 of section 6 authorizes the task force to create subcommittees for any purpose that is consistent with the duties of the task force. This would be a new authority for the task force. In closing, I would like to thank Chair Torres and members of the committee for hearing this bill today, and I urge your support of Assembly Bill 366. Thank you. And at this time, I'll pass it over to my co-presenter, Ms. Salas Crespo, Deputy Secretary of State.
Good morning, Chair Torres and members of the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs. My name is Maggie Salas Crespo, and I serve as the Deputy Secretary of State for Southern Nevada. I would like to thank Assemblyman De Silva for inviting the Secretary of State's office to co-present Assembly Bill 366, along with the Lieutenant Governor's office, who are joining us from Las Vegas. Our office is in full support of moving the Keep Nevada Working Task Force, and we have been working closely with the Lieutenant Governor's office and Assemblyman De Silva to ensure a smooth transition. As stated by Assemblyman De Silva, the task force was charged with developing strategies to support current and future industries across Nevada, supporting the efforts of businesses and others to provide workforce stability, and recommending approaches to attract and retain immigrant business owners. The Secretary of State's office is the first stop for business registration, which is a responsibility we take seriously. Secretary Aguilar has directed us to provide any support to Nevada small businesses that we can, especially those coming from underserved populations. We believe housing the task force within our office will allow us to learn more about the needs of the immigrant workforce and business community, and to better serve them and guide them through the process of starting or growing their business. We hope to earn your support of this bill, and I stand ready to answer any questions.
Members, any questions? Assemblyman Koenig.
So this is changing the makeup from 9 to 10? Is that correct? So I know that this isn't, and this is more advisory board, but I have a little bit of a concern of an even number. I've got a bill right now that I'm working with another advisory group that is actually an even number, and they're split half and half. And it's making it a little bit difficult for me to go forward because I'm not sure how to represent that group when they're split. So I don't know, potentially add another one to get to 11 or leave it at 9. I mean, with that size of group and what they're doing, it probably isn't going to be an issue, but there is the potential down the line that could possibly happen, and that would just make things complicated.
Maggie Salas Crespo for the record. Thank you so much for your question, Assemblyman. So the 10th additional member is to ensure that we continue the partnership with the Lieutenant Governor's office, and we have a member appointed by his office, either to represent the Lieutenant Governor or himself or someone of his choosing, and also someone from the Secretary of State, the Secretary himself or someone from his choosing. So we do hope to continue to have this bipartisan effort between both offices, and that way, if there is a tie, I'm hoping both of our heads of our agencies can help figure that out.
Ruben De Silva for the record. Thank you again for that question, Assemblyman. And that really was the real premise here. We wanted to make sure there was some continuity and a sense of a co-partnership between the two offices as we move forward. And that was a recommendation that was made, and we wanted to have that voice still present there, and that ability for the Lieutenant Governor to appoint his designee onto this task force. Thank you.
Assemblyman Thomas.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning, and thank you for the presentation. I do appreciate this premise in this AB 366, and I just wanted to make sure that my name is still attached to that, and if we could do a friendly amendment to have me co-sponsor again. Thank you.
Thank you for the remarks, Assemblyman Thomas, but I think to answer that, because it is a committee bill, we are unable to add sponsors. But because we're all part of the committee, we all get to take responsibility for it. So good work. Thank you. Assemblyman Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for bringing this forward, and thank you for your thinking and the best way to continue to make sure this effort works in our state. I have a question. I know that you mentioned, and I appreciate the Secretary of State's office being here, so thank you so much. I'm wondering if you can share the perspective from the Lieutenant Governor's office. I don't know if anyone's here from that office, and I'm hopeful we can get that perspective as well. Okay,
Looks like a representative is in Las Vegas, so when you're ready.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, Chair and members, good morning. Is it okay? I had a prepared statement that I was going to do during public comment, but could I offer it now?
Yes, please proceed.
Okay, great. My name is Rudy Pamantuan, and I serve as the Chief of Staff to the Lieutenant Governor Stavros Anthony. This bill, AB 366, would move the Keep Nevada Working Task Force from our office to the Office of the Secretary of State. The Lieutenant Governor and the Secretary of State have a great friendship and a working relationship, and have discussed this issue at great length. As Nevada is now open for business with growth and opportunity, the Lieutenant Governor and the Secretary of State agree that we need to make sure that all Nevada residents participate, especially immigrants and new Americans, in ensuring that no Nevadan is left behind. As the Office of the Secretary of State has more resources and personnel to dedicate to this important work of the task force, the Lieutenant Governor supports AB 366, and our office looks forward to supporting the transition of the office of the task force of the office to the Secretary of State's office. So thank you for your time, your leadership, and your hard work for our great state. So I'll hang out here for any questions moving forward, but our office and Lieutenant Governor strongly support this bill.
Thank you so much. I appreciate those comments. That certainly makes a difference for me, that there's collaboration. It's good to see that. So thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Assemblyman Hibbets.
Thank you, Chair. So let me make sure I get the citation right here. Section 6, looks like subsection 5 on the very top of page 4 on the big sheets here. It says, "The Office of the Secretary of State shall provide personnel, facilities, equipment, funding, and supplies as required by the task force to carry out its duties." Yet the fiscal note from your agency says $0. Can you explain how we're getting to that with this policy?
Yes, Maggie Salas-Gerspo for the record. Thank you, Assemblyman Hibbets, for the question. So for context, the Secretary of State's office has more staff capacity to ensure the needs of the task force. Just to paint a picture of this, in my role as Deputy Secretary of State for Southern Nevada, I oversee 4 programs and have I have 9 staff members directly under my supervision, which is greater than what's available at the Lieutenant Governor's office. So, this move really is, the Lieutenant Governor's office is quite small. And just under my supervision, which I oversee some of the smallest programs within the Secretary of State, I have more staff under me that can help with this, and that includes several admin assistants, as well as me ensuring that the duties of the task force are met.
Yeah, quickly.
So basically, if I'm understanding you, you do not anticipate having to add any more staff or equipment or anything like that in order to take this over?
Maggie Salas-Gerspo for the record, that is correct.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And if I remember correctly from the 2021 legislative cycle, the Office of Lieutenant Governor didn't put a fiscal note on that work either. So this would be consistent with what was passed with AB 376 of 2019. Members, any additional questions? Assemblyman Gurr.
This isn't so much a question as a comment. My definition of task force is a little different than what I'm seeing here, and I don't think we need to put task force into law, maybe program. Task force to me is you're specifically tasked to go do one thing or two, and then it disappears. This one doesn't disappear. So in my mind, maybe a word change from task force to workforce program, I don't know. It just sticks in my mind as a funny way to put a task force into law. Just a comment.
Yeah, thank you for that comment, Assemblyman. Ruben De Silva for the record. Yeah, we will definitely take that into consideration and look into if this is something that we could shimmy up a little bit. But yeah, still, as it stands, we're looking at this as a task force, sort of avenue forward because of the fact that there is an issue to be addressed here, and there will be some continuity. But I think that is something that we can take into consideration. Thank you, Assemblyman.
Thank you, and I think that might have been the first time that a legislator has used the word shimmy on the record, so I'm very excited that I got to be the second time. Assembly members, any additional questions? It doesn't appear there are any. Thank you. At this time, we'll go ahead and invite anyone wishing to testify in support of AB 366. You can shimmy on your way up here in Carson City or in Las Vegas, and when you're ready, please begin.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Hi, my name is Salida Amador. I'm guest room attendant of the Las Vegas Strip, and I am proud culinary union member for 8 years. I'm here today in support of AB 366. I'm originally from Tijuana, Mexico, and I immigrated to the United States in 1993 with my 2 daughters in search of a better life. My parents worked as field workers and eventually were able to become U.S. citizen. I moved to Las Vegas because I heard there were good union jobs where workers were treated with dignity, had job security, and who were paid really well. Now I have a good job and I'm a U.S. citizen. In fact, 13 of my siblings are also U.S. citizens. We work hard. We love this country, and we want to create a better future for our family. As an immigrant, our voices are important to Nevada, and I'm proud that my union helped to create the Keep Nevada Families Working Task Force. I support AB 366 and ask the Nevada Legislature to support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Next in Las Vegas.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Deanna Hewitt-Tran. That's DEANNA space HUA space TRAN. And I'm the coalition coordinator for the Nevada Immigrant Coalition here on behalf of the coalition. And we are grateful for the Keep Nevada Working Task Force diligence towards promotion, research, and creation of policies that continue to protect and support our immigrant, refugee, and asylee communities. We look forward to continue supporting the prospective efforts of the Keep Nevada Working Task Force and support the transition of the task force to the Secretary of State's office in order to continue the success of integration and economic development for our immigrant communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good morning, members of the committee. My name is Bethany Kahn, and I'm proudly the first-generation daughter of immigrants who sacrificed immensely so that I could have the opportunities that I have today. I'm a member of the Keep Nevada Working Task Force, and I'm proud to be here today representing the Culinary Union in support of AB 366, and we thank the sponsor and Assemblyman De Silva for shepherding this bill. Culinary Union is Nevada's largest immigrant organization and union. We represent 60,000 workers who come from 178 countries and speak over 40 different languages. Our members work as guest room attendants like Elida, cocktail and food servers, porters, bellmans, cooks, bartenders, and more. And thousands of hospitality workers we represent have temporary protected status or dreamers. And our union will not stop fighting until there's comprehensive worker-centered immigration reform. Our union's been fighting and winning for working families for 88 years, and we're proud to have helped over 18,000 immigrants become U.S. citizens since 2001 through the Citizenship Project. Since the task force was created last session, we've been working to protect and advocate for immigrants in Nevada, and looking forward, the task force is committed to study and provide recommendation on how Nevada can better support workforce development of our immigrant communities. The Culinary Union, which is a founding member of the Nevada Immigrant Coalition, fully supports this bill, and we urge the legislature to pass AB 366. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in Las Vegas wishing to testify in support of AB 366? At this time, I'll invite anyone, BPS, is there anyone in line wishing to testify in support of AB 366?
Callers, if you would like to testify in support of AB 366, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers choosing to testify in support at this time.
Thank you. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to testify in opposition to AB 366? Is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to testify in opposition to AB 366? BPS, is there anyone on the line wishing to testify in opposition to AB 366?
Callers, if you would like to testify in opposition to AB 366, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers choosing to provide opposition testimony at this time.
Thank you. Is there anyone wishing to testify neutral in Carson City or in Las Vegas to AB 366? Seeing none, BPS, is there anyone on the line wishing to testify neutral to AB 366?
Callers, if you would like to testify in neutral for AB 366, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers choosing to testify in neutral at this time.
Thank you. At this time, I'll invite the bill sponsor. Any closing remarks?
Thank you, Madam Chair and distinguished members of the committee. Ruben De Silva for the record. I want to thank you for listening to this presentation and hearing us out, and I urge your support for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblymember. At this time, we'll go ahead and close the hearing on AB 366. And we will open the hearing on AB 258. We already opened the hearing, so you're right on time. I guess there was a pink memo too, so I feel a little disappointed we didn't get it. So thank you for shimmying your way up to the seats. That's our word of the day here in Government Affairs. Feel free to use it as often as possible. I know Assemblyman DeLong is thinking right now how he could use the word shimmy. He's gonna find a way, no worries.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you for noticing our color coordination today. I appreciate that. So thank you, Chair Torres, and probably my favorite 9 a.m. committee members. I am Shay Backus, representing Assembly District 37 in Clark County. Thank you for the opportunity to allow me to present Assembly Bill 258, which seeks to find the appropriate balance between the government power and people's right to privacy. Specifically, AB 258 would require state agencies to keep 50C3 nonprofit information confidential, including donor, member, and volunteer data, except information which is already required by law to be made public as part of annual filings or other disclosures. Additionally, AB 258 would prohibit state agencies from collecting sensitive information related to 501c nonprofits, membership, volunteer list, or donor records unless there is a legitimate reason to do so as outlined in Section 2, subsection 3 of the bill, as well as many amendments that we've put forward that you should probably be able to find as exhibits on Nellis. As the bill is fairly short, I will quickly walk the committee through it. Section 1 adds certain information described in Section 2 to the list of information that is not a public record. Section 2 requires, with certain expectations, a governmental agency to keep confidential any personal information in the records of the government agency that identifies a person as a donor, member, or volunteer of a nonprofit organization. The bill further prohibits, with certain exceptions, a governmental agency from 1, requiring that any person or nonprofit organization provide the agency with personal information that identifies a donor, member, or volunteer of a nonprofit organization. 2, from releasing, publicizing, or otherwise publicly disclosing information, personal information that identifies a donor, member, or volunteer of a nonprofit organization. Or 3, requesting or requiring a current or prospective contractor or grantee to provide a list of nonprofit organizations to which the contractor or grantee has provided support. The personal information that identifies a donor, member, or volunteer of a nonprofit organization includes any list, record, register, roster, or other data of any kind that includes a donation, name, address, or telephone number that directly or indirectly identifies a person as a donor or a financial or non-financial support, member, or volunteer of any nonprofit organization. The bill provides that a person who believes that a governmental agency or an officer or employee of a governmental agency has violated these provisions may bring a civil action to obtain certain relief, including injunctive relief as the court deems appropriate. 2, costs incurred in bringing the action, including without limitation, reasonable attorney's fees. And 3, damages in the amount of not less than $2,500 for a violation, unless the court determines it was an intentional violation, then damages of not less than $7,500. Any officer or employee of a governmental agency who knowingly or willfully violates these provisions is guilty of a misdemeanor and shall be punished by imprisonment in the county jail for not more than 90 days, by a fine of not more than $1,000, or by both an fine and imprisonment. Section 3 of this bill makes a conforming change to prohibit the Secretary of State from collecting or disclosing any information that directly identifies a person as a donor or financial information to a nonprofit organization. Importantly, this measure does not change or weaken any current disclosures required by state campaign finance, nonprofit, or corporate registration laws. And AB 258 explicitly permits for any other legally required disclosure from nonprofit causes. Instead, the proactive privacy protections in AB 258 are intended to prohibit rogue office holders and agencies from operating outside their legal jurisdiction and weaponizing the powers of the office against people or organizations that may otherwise dislike. I want to emphasize that this bill is a proactive, preventative measure, and to put on the record that the Secretary of State has relayed that the office does not currently engage in the practices that AB 258 is prohibiting. I also want to note that nothing in this bill limits, nor is it intended of this bill to limit public information on state employees that nonprofits currently have access to, whether it be AFSCME or MPRI. Finally, I want to go over the proposed conceptual amendment that has been uploaded to Nellis. First, we're adding Assemblywoman Heidi Kasama as a co-sponsor to this bill. In Section 2, subsection 7.1, court will be added to the definition of government agency. Third, at the request of the Ethics Commission, we are adding Section 2, subsection 3.0, to include a requirement to disclose this will be so I'm going to go through a litany of exceptions that are going to be added to the bill, and most of it is through our conversations with multiple agencies well before this bill has been in the works. We've worked really hard to come to agreements with different agencies to provide exceptions to avoid any unintended consequences. So that would add a requirement to disclose the relationship between a person and a nonprofit organization pursuant to NRS 281A.420, or as a response to a lawful request or subpoena in an investigation or adversarial Adversary. Advisory, thank you. Opinion. Sometimes I get stuck on my words. Request conducted pursuant to NRS 281A.670 through 281.790. At the request of the Nevada Gaming Commission, we are adding Section 2, subsection 3P, to include an exception for a request from the Gaming Control Board pursuant to NRS 462.160 for the purposes of licensing or regulation of a charitable lottery or charitable game, provided that any information so collected shall remain subject to the confidentiality provisions of NRS 463.120. At the request of the Secretary of State's office, we are adding additional language to the end of Section 2, subsection 3N, which would extend, in addition to the federal law cited therein, to include the licensing, registration, examination, investigation, and enforcement authority of the Secretary of State as set forth in NRS Chapters 90, 91, and the Nevada Administrative Code 90. At the request of the Attorney General's office, we are striking Section 2, subsection 7B3, and rewriting Section 2, subsection 3F1 to be that the relevant and probative value of the information requested outweighs its prejudicial effect. Additionally, at the request of the Attorney General's office, we will be adding Section 2, subsection 3Q, so that it actually has two parts. So Q1 will include additional information required for an audit, examination, review, or investigation pursuant to NRS 82.536, provided that such information shall only be used in connection with the specific audit, examination, review, or investigation to which the request relates, and for any related proceedings, provided further that any information so collected shall otherwise remain subject to the provisions of this chapter, unless expressly required to publicly disclose. Or the other option will be Q2, for information required relating to the authority to act and exercise the power of the Attorney General in the areas of consumer protection, including without limitation, as Pren's Part Trier, which I'm assuming I could see the chair of this committee inquiring what that means. So I'll go ahead and tell that is regarded as a legal protector of citizens unable to protect themselves, of the person residing in the state pursuant to NRS 228.380 and enforcement of chapters 90, there's a list there that you can look on the amendment, provided that any information so collected shall otherwise remain subject to the provisions of this chapter unless expressly required to be publicly disclosed. At the request of public sector unions and state and local agencies, we are adding Section 2, subsection 3R, to provide that the provisions of names of members of labor organizations and amounts of dues collected provided to a labor organization as defined under Chapter 288 of the Nevada Revised Statutes by a local government employer for purposes of collection and reporting of remittance of dues to a labor organization from its members pursuant to a valid dues checkoff authorization. Finally, we are adding a severability clause to Section 4, so that if it will provide, if any provision of this act or its application to any person or circumstance is held invalid, then the invalidity shall not affect other provisions of the applications of the act that can be given effect without the invalid provision or application, and to the end the provisions of this act shall be severable. In closing, I would like to thank Chair Torres and the members of the committee for hearing this bill today, and I would ask for your support of Assembly Bill 258. I also have today with me Martin Fitzgerald and Eric Roberts, who have been working really diligently with a bunch of stakeholders to make this a really good bipartisan bill. So we are all three ready to answer any questions, unless you guys want to add anything. Okay, we'll be ready for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Assembly members, any questions? Assemblyman DeLong.
Let me shimmy up to the mic.
Well,
Thank you, Chair.
well done, well done.
This committee has either heard or will be potentially hearing a number of bills that relate to keeping people's information private. And the other bills that I've read, none of them have these provisions for suing with fines and jail time. I'm wondering, why is that needed in this one versus all the other bills we have heard or will be hearing?
Thank you, Assemblyman DeLong, by and through Chair Torres, Shea Backus for the record.
Please go directly to the member.
Thank you so much. One, I think with this, it's to put some meat into it, but I will allow the other folks with me to elaborate further.
Martin Fitzgerald for the record. It is to put meat into it. I'll also note that versions of this bill have passed in 15 other states over the last 5 years, and with these provisions. And so far, no lawsuits have come forward. And again, these are proactive, preventative measures intended to memorialize how things currently operate and to put a fence around the power of the state so that they aren't weaponized by an unscrupulous office holder or agency to go after somebody. And so the intent here is to make sure that there is some ability for people to protect themselves from an agency or an agent of government that may otherwise try and use their office in an unethical manner. And again, I note the provisions. If it's an unintentional release, it's up to a $2,500 compensation. And then if it's intentional and you have to prove intent and willful, then, only then is there a $7,500 increase in penalty and a potential for criminal offense. And it's a misdemeanor.
Thank you, Assemblyman Gonzalez, then Assemblyman Gurr.
Thank you so much for the presentation. So my question is, so you said in 15 states no one's brought a lawsuit. In all of those other states, has anyone been charged criminally?
Martin Fitzgerald for record, no. So far, this law hasn't had to be used, and the intent here isn't for the law ever, hopefully, to have to be used. It's there to say if someone is feeling they're being victimized by the state, they can come and bring a cause of action. But so far, agencies know that there is meat behind if they act outside the bounds of law, and so they're acting within the laws in these other states.
Follow-up, Chair. I have a couple questions, sorry, and I don't know if I'm just not educated on this issue. Is there situations that have arose for this?
Yeah, there.
Kind of like what that looks like?
And if you could make sure you state your name for the record.
Thank you. Martin Fitzgerald for the record. I think what we have seen in this state and other states is there have been people who have run for office or been in office who have threatened and attempted to use their office to go after your political opponents. But then even thinking broader than that, there can be personal relationships where people can use their office to go after someone that they dislike. We have seen some examples. One case example is in the state of New York. Members of the Attorney General's office intentionally released information related to a nonprofit in order to weaponize it. In that case, it was a conservative organization. We have seen conservative politicians threaten to do the same thing to liberal organizations. And so the intent that we've done here is to try and make this a bipartisan approach and nonpartisan approach so that everyone is treated equally. And so no matter what you're advocating for, you have a constitutionally protected right so that you are not victimized by government just because whoever's in office may not like you.
So to understand, what you're saying is that you've had politicians threaten nonprofit organizations?
Yes.
Okay. I guess I'm just a little nervous about jail time and throwing people in jail, and I know you've said no one has used it, but that just makes me a little nervous. So I think we could talk offline more, but thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Assemblyman Gurr.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. In section 2, sub 4, you say that any person who believes a government agency has violated subsection 1 or 2 may bring a civil action. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this seems to open the door to absolutely anyone to file suit and collect damages even if their information was not the information being used. Why is it not restricted to the person or organization whose information was released? And a second part to that question is, sounds to me like you've worked with state agencies. Have you talked to any municipalities, cities, counties about this? And with that, Madam Chair, I'll shimmy away from the mic.
Our secretary's gonna love writing these minutes.
Shay Backus, for the record. Thank you, Assemblyman Gurr. I'll answer part, and then I will have Mr. Fitzgerald answer the other part. Yeah, you are correct. It does allow any person who believes that that a government agency or an officer and an employee of a government agency has violated the provisions of subsection 1 or 2 to bring a civil action in a court. So you are correct. Anybody that becomes knowledgeable of this could bring this action pursuant to subsection 4.
Martin Fitzgerald for the record. So we have engaged a number of stakeholders, and with the chair's diligence, she gave us space to have these conversations. And agencies have reached out to us. We did not directly go to municipalities, but I will say it's been out there, and agencies and individuals have come to us specifically about this. So I would say we've had dozens of conversations on this, and so I think I'll leave that to that, but.
Shay Backus for the record. I do want to add, Assemblyman Gurr, this bill had been filed on March 7th, 2023, and in this legislative world, we are gracious for the time the chair gave us to do our presentation, so it's been out there for 3 weeks now.
Thank you for that. The follow-up, if you mind, don't mind, Chair. So if I hear a rumor down the street that somebody did something to somebody in the government, and I bring a suit and win on that rumor, I get the damages, not the person who was damaged in the process. Is that true?
Thank you, Assemblyman Gurr. So funny, Shay Backus for the record. I keep trying to hit where my spot would be, where I'd be sitting in your guys' spots. And I think it's hard with rumor. I would caution against that just as an attorney, understanding what the rules of procedure under NRCP 11 provide is you have to have like knowledge of something to bring a case or good faith belief. But in your situation where if you did have knowledge of it, there is a penalty. The whole point of it is that there would be damages, and it provides that it's not less than $2,500. That doesn't mean that a judge is automatically going to provide the $2,500 in damages. It just allows that as an option. The whole goal behind this is to add meat to defer the conduct from happening anyway. And I want to add, we have put a litany, like a long list, as you guys probably have read in this provision as to exceptions of when it's okay for such information to be released. And we're hoping that no one does go and do this, but the threats that have been made around the country to exploit such information is the reason why we brought this bill.
Thank you, Assemblyman Taylor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Assemblymember Backus, and those who've presented. Well, you haven't said much yet, but you know, there's still time. There's still time, and you have a pink tie on, so that's good. The color coordination. Just because I am not an attorney, right? Nor do I play one on TV. If you can kind of put in layman's terms, if you will, on the conceptual amendment, number 3 and especially number 6 for me, please.
Thank you, Assemblywoman, for your
And
question.
as
Shay
a-
Backus for the record.
Someone, just before you start, just clarification, which amendment are we going off of? Because I have 2 different ones, and I'm not sure if we're going off of this one or if we're going off of the other one.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. We're going off the one that's not on my letterhead.
Well, that's not on your, I was looking at the one on your letterhead.
But the good news is pretty much where you're at, the order is pretty much on par. The changes happen at the end where we added some. Oh, you know what, actually, we now added into one that Assemblywoman Kasama would be a co-sponsor, but I feel like she may have been listed on the first one as well.
I just have the one on your letterhead. Is this the wrong one?
That is the wrong one, but I can still address those because they're still included in the conceptual amendment, the updated one, and I believe your first one is the Ethics Commission.
I'm sorry? Oh, I can find it. I mean, I'm sure, if it's on the list, I'm sure I can find it. She says she's gonna speak to this, so I'm getting great help from my colleagues, but you guys are confusing me. No, I just wanna be where and she said she was gonna speak to this, that's why I didn't move. So thank you.
So-
Be ready to help in case I need you.
Thank you, everyone in Government Affairs, for being so generous and helpful, but I can go ahead and, the one you're looking at, Assemblywoman, is inclusive of we have additional amendments as well. And so I believe number 3 is the Ethics Commission portion. And we were reached out by the director, Mr. Armstrong, about concerns over doing an investigation and being precluded from such information, and so we made an exception. And I hope that, so for the example, a layperson, so sometimes I do too much lawyery stuff, is if I was a part of a nonprofit and I was on the list and maybe I came up for an ethics investigation, that it would allow the Ethics Commission to go to another agency to get that information if they had it. So it permits them to dive into a list to do their investigation, ethics investigation. And Assemblywoman, I think it was number 5 was the second one.
6,
You had a
please.
question. 6.
Well, there's 6 on the, now it's 6 on, I just switched over to Martin's. It was, which,
Martin Fitzgerald, for the record, is this the ones related to the Attorney General's
well, I was
office?
gonna say, where it speaks to the Attorney General's office, yes, thank you.
Yeah, so this is related to their criminal and civil investigations. And so in conversations with their office, they let us know that the original language was too restrictive, and so we've been working with them to allow their offices to have the ability to engage in the related investigations, both civilly and criminally, and in oversight and regulations of nonprofits as part of their duties under NRS.
Okay, I believe I followed that, thank you. I'm fine, I've got way more information than I can get through right now, so I'll follow up with you individually if I need to. It's just, lots of extra help, which I appreciate when I'm not lost. But anyway, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Assemblyman DeLong.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to follow up on one of my colleagues' comments with regards to, I'll just put it, I'm not a lawyer either, but I'll use the discussion about standing on who can sue, to me seems overly broad. That I think the party that's harmed could sue, I understand that, but anyone, it starts to sound like citizen suit provisions under the Clean Air Act. And so, just a comment, Chair.
Thank you, Assemblyman DeLong, Shea Backus, for the record, and I agree with you. For someone to have and I didn't want to get into this more complicated situation because of how it's written. Obviously, there is a constitutional standard that one must have justiciability. There must be justiciability for a suit to be brought, and as part of that is to have standing. And to have standing, you are an injured party. However, our Nevada Supreme Court has recently expanded some entities, such as NPRI, to have proper standing when they may not necessarily be injured because they're looking out for the public. So with that, we would have to rely on that standing. But as an attorney, if I was one defending a state agency or an individual who may have released intended private information from nonprofit list, in that situation, that would be an argument. You could always challenge the standing. And I should have made that more clear to Assemblyman Gurr.
Members, any additional questions? I think, it's weird, my mic went off. I think that's something that would be helpful for the committee is if you could just if we could just break it down a little bit more. And, Assemblyman Backus, you're a phenomenal legislator. And I know that you understand this work at a super high level, but I'm hoping you can break it down and kind of explain this bill at a little bit more basic at a 5th grade level. Can you explain exactly what this bill is doing, why we need it, and how that process would work? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chair. Basically, in a nutshell, is lately in our country, and I'm going to echo kind of what Mr. Fitzgerald said, O'Shea Backus for the record, is that we're seeing people who may want to serve in elected positions and utilize their elected position to maybe exploit information they could secure in their position. For example, and this is why this is a nonpartisan bill, for example, let's look at nonprofits like both Planned Parenthood and Right to Life. If you're on the opposite side and you want to exploit those lists and utilize your office, that's what we're trying to prevent. And there have been threats made by candidates as well as people even sitting in office that may try to do that. And that's what this bill in a big picture is trying to prevent. Then we realized always there's unintended consequences with bills that sometimes we create. And so we've been trying to work diligently to provide exceptions from that. And so with this, and it could be also someone that is under that elected official's position who decides to intentionally, if a person intentionally wants to take that information, they get a hold of a list through an investigation, let's say, and they want to release it to the public. That's where that meat comes in, and I'm not one that wants to put people in jail either, but it's there to be more of a threat so that people think twice before they move forward. The other thing is the civil remedies. I kind of think sometimes those civil remedies might be light for an agency. I mean, they could weigh it and go, oh, what's $2,500, but I hope they wouldn't do that. So that hopefully, Chair, I kind of broke that down. I hope you don't want me to go through each of the exceptions, but hopefully that gives you guys an idea of what the purpose is.
Thank you. And I do have a follow-up to that. Is this only applicable to the nonprofit organization, or this is also applicable to government agencies, right? So a government agency that has donors, members, or volunteers, would this be applicable to them? Or no, it's only applicable to the nonprofit? So I guess I'm confused then on that end, how a government, like an elected official, would be able to use that information or even obtain that information?
Martin Fitzgerald for the record. So again, this is proactive, and so you can't, there are always hypotheticals, and so you have to think of, how would a government agency otherwise interact with a nonprofit? And so through those interactions, they may get a volunteer list, a donor list. It would just depend on different agencies. And so again, this isn't trying to change current practices. This is trying to prohibit unscrupulous actions. And so the good news is that we shouldn't be actually thinking of how governments currently act because they shouldn't be doing anything. And the Secretary of State's office relayed that they specifically don't do the stuff that's in this thing. And so we're trying to prohibit a future office holder or future government agent from being able to do the types of things that are in this. And so this is a measure to put a fence around the government's power.
Thank you. It looks like we do have another question. Assemblyman Nguyen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you again to our colleague to bring this on. And I'm in the nonprofit world, so this really speaks to me and the things that I get to do every day before I join this body. In terms of the 501c section, I know a lot of time the members of the public are not very familiar with all those sections, and I know this is the federal tax code, and we can spend all day with this, but I'm gonna shimmy back from that aspects and just go on the state level. So in terms of the 501c's section, is this bill intent to cover all of the 501c's? So we're talking about, I know most of the members of the public are familiar with 501c3s, right? Which is the typical nonprofit charitable organization, but we have 501c6, which are membership organization, 501c5, which are labor organizations. So is this particular bill would cover all of the section of the 501c's?
Martin Fitzgerald for the record. Yes, exactly. And so we typically think of 501c3s and 501c4s, which are nonprofit groups. It could be the Humane Society, it could be advocacy organizations, but you're exactly correct. Labor unions fall under this. And so that's also another example. Membership organizations, which I believe the chambers are an example of this. And so this is, the idea again is to make this comprehensive and to not favor anyone. And so whether it's ideological or the type of organization, we're trying to say everyone can be protected here. And to the chair's previous question, that might be an example of, from a democratic perspective, if a government agency regulates or interacts with unions and they get a hold of their membership lists or their dues payers, they could then attempt to weaponize that against the union. And then to the Assemblywoman's example on the other side, if there is a Democratic or progressive office holder who gets information related to a conservative organization like the Right to Life, if they get memberships, their membership list, volunteer list, donor list, they could attempt to weaponize that against them. And so the purpose of this organization, of this bill, is to protect everyone and protect everyone equally, regardless of their cause or type of organization. So that is the intent. Thank you so much for the question.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, any additional questions? All right, I think you all are done. Yes, go ahead, Assemblywoman.
Chair Torres, if you guys don't mind, I may sneak back up to Ways and Means and allow my colleagues to hear out the support and opposition testimony. And if anyone needs me offline, I'm available, and I'll let them do the closing for me. Thanks.
Yes, Assemblywoman, feel free to shimmy your way on back up to Ways and Means, a less efficient working committee. All right, at this time, we'll invite anyone wishing to testify in support of AB 258.
It's not often we get to sit together. Hello, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Annette Magnus, and I'm the Executive Director of Battleborn Progress. We are here this morning to show our support for AB 258. As Executive Director of a nonprofit organization, I can speak to the need for privacy in the work we do. Our job is to hold all of you, elected leaders, accountable and support communities in Nevada on the issues that matter most. This work does not come without its share of struggles, and sometimes we desperately need privacy to protect our employees, our donors, and our volunteers. I personally have received death threats doing this work. I personally have had people come to my house doing this work. I don't want that for my employees. AB 258 puts in place protections that are necessary for us to do our jobs. You know our brand, and many of you have seen our work. It is no shock, given what we do, that we are often a target. We must protect privacy for nonprofits so they can continue doing the work that they need to do, whether we agree with their politics or not. This is an issue of safety for many of us who do this work, and it is truly a nonpartisan issue. Thank you, and please support this important bill.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Marlene Lockard, and I'm representing SEIU 1107. And with this amendment, we are in complete support of this bill. On a personal note, I would like to add that I am the past chair and on the board of the Domestic Violence Resource Center, and this is an important bill to protect our information there, which is confidential in some places already, but thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Torres and members of the committee. My name is Wiz Rizard, Deputy State Director with Americans for Prosperity. We definitely support this bill. One thing I do want to add on the record, our sister organization, Americans for Prosperity Foundation versus the case, Americans for Prosperity Foundation versus Bonta and the Attorney General of California is a very interesting case that the Supreme Court actually ruled that solidified the First Amendment and what this bill is really trying to reinforce, and that is the right to privacy when it comes to an individual donating to a 501c3, which is very important. I walk around with this every single day because the First Amendment is exactly what helps create this type of environment in this chamber for individuals to not only express themselves, but also to contribute to organizations. There are many reasons people value their privacy. One, of course, is to avoid the kind of harassment and threats that are increasingly likely in a polarized environment. Forcing people who join causes to reveal the personal information to those in political power puts them at risk for retaliation and harassment. And I would encourage you to really look at that case because you're talking about a government official in office being utilized to then squander a 501c3 and being able to contribute to the community. That's why legitimate concerns about accountability should be addressed by increasing transparency for government, privacy for the people and their membership in and in support of organizations that represent issues that they're passionate about, enable citizens to actually stand up for their values without fear of persecution and hold those in power accountable. And that was to address the question in regards to why the fines and fees in the criminal prosecution process. We need to make sure we create that framework around the Institute of Government to say you're not going to be an elected official and abuse your power and not see consequences to that. This is not a Republican or a Democrat issue. It is truly fundamentally an American issue. So we urge you to support AB 258, and I stand proudly with all of these organizations, regardless of political affiliation, to really stand with the First Amendment, and by voting yes, you solidify that. So thank you, Chairwoman, for your time. Thank the bill sponsor for bringing this forward, and thank everyone for the time to hear this out. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Torres and members of the committee. My name is Eric Jeng, ERICJENG. I'm the Acting Executive Director of One API Nevada. We are a nonprofit organizing and advocating for the well-being and empowerment of the fast-growing Asian Pacific Islander communities here in Nevada. We also work with a slew of 501c3 nonprofits that serves our community in different ways. We didn't do it alone. We didn't just shimming our way to get a seat at the table. We're able to gain true representation and win justice and equity because of the leadership, the board, the volunteers, and donors to help us get stuff done. Many, if not all, of the committee members here have either funded, ran, worked for, volunteered, and donated for many of the nonprofits here in our great state. It's a diverse nature. I like to say it's a diverse tapestry that weave together that make Nevada strong. And at the end of the day, the privacy of the nonprofit staff, members, volunteers, and donors should be respected and protected. I want to thank Assemblywoman Backus, who's also my Assemblywoman, for AB 258. It strengthens what's already in our Constitution, the freedom of association, the freedom of speech, and rights to privacy. As sponsors mentioned, it is a preventive, proactive, and mostly a peace of mind and safety for all of us that calls this great state home and doing all we can to make it great. Thank you.
Looks like we have somebody in Las Vegas wishing to testify in support of AB 258.
Good morning, Chair Torres and committee members. My name is Carrie Durmick, that is Kerrydurmick, and I'm the Nevada State Director for All Voting is Local Action. We're an organization that exists to expose and dismantle threats to voter freedom in order to make voting safe, fair, and accessible, and to build a democracy for all of us. We support AB 258, a bill that strikes a balance between both responsibility and power and puts a fence around state power and protects all Nevadans from overzealous state action. Essentially, AB 258 would protect Nevadans' First Amendment rights to come together and associate as they see fit. This is a needed protection for the robust community of nonprofits in Nevada, like All Voting is Local Action and several of the nonprofits that testified in support today. And this legislation will help defend the First Amendment rights of all Nevadans. Thank you for your time, and please support AB 258.
Thank you. It looks like we have somebody else here in Carson City. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Melissa Clement, for the record, MELISSACLEMENT with Nevada Right to Life. I strongly urge support of this measure. I'm sad that I missed the opportunity to sit next to some of the people I'm never sitting next to. This is one of those bipartisan bills. I think there are several, you've heard of several before, but I would add our organization to one of the organizations that deals with this. We have to be able to protect our donors and our volunteers. I appreciate the opportunity to be in support of a bill in front of you today, and I urge your support of AB 258. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else wishing to testify in support to AB 258 here in Carson City or in Las Vegas? Not seeing any. BPS, is there anyone on the line wishing to testify in support of AB 258?
Callers, if you would like to testify in support of AB 258, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christine Saunders. That's CHRISTINESAUNDERS. And I'm the Policy Director with the Progressive Leadership Alliance of Nevada, here in support of Assembly Bill 258. For nearly 30 years, PLAN has led the fight with Nevada activists, organizations, frontline communities, and directly impacted leaders for policy changes and community investments that improve the lives of Nevadans, regardless of whether or not politicians find those ideas popular. We are testifying in support of AB 258 because our First Amendment rights to raise our voice and build a community of change should not subject us to harassment and intimidation. AB 258 puts in place appropriate guardrails that will protect nonprofits from that type of harassment and intimidation and restrain potentially unethical office holders from engaging in unethical actions. By putting these balanced protections, organizations like ours can continue to engage in their protected constitutional rights, and the government can continue to engage in their legitimate enactment of public policy. This is a sound policy that treats all nonprofits, regardless of ideology, equally and makes Nevada's government a better actor. We urge your support. Thank you.
Is there anyone else online, BPS?
One moment, Chair.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. My name is Jessica Munger, M-U-N-G-E-R, and I'm the Program Manager of Silver State Equality, Nevada's statewide LGBTQ+ civil rights organization, and we are in support of AB 258. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits 859. You're unmuted on our end. Please go ahead. Caller with the last three digits 859. You're unmuted on our end. Please go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please proceed.
Caller with the last three digits 859. Please press *6 to unmute your microphone. Caller, you're unmuted on our end. Please go ahead.
I've tried several times to get in. Can you hear me?
Yes, you'll be on.
Caller, please go ahead.
There? Hello?
Hello, we hear you, ma'am. Please proceed.
Okay, this is Janine Hansen. Can you hear me?
Yes, Miss Hanson, we could hear you.
Oh my goodness, thank you. My name is Janine Hansen, and I'm the state president of Nevada Families for Freedom. We fully support this measure, AB 258, and thank Assemblywoman Backus for bringing it forward. In 2021, during the session, there was a bill, SB 62, which would have forced nonprofits to register with the Secretary of State as the first move towards exposing their donors. This was along the lines of what California did in forcing nonprofits to expose who their donors were. It was mentioned earlier, but the U.S. Supreme Court, by a 6-3 vote, the court struck down California's law requiring nonprofits to file a list of their large donors with the state. The court said the law subjected donors to potential harassment, chilling their speech in violation of the First Amendment. We are significantly concerned about exposing donors of nonprofits to harassment, not only by government, but by individuals who may disagree with them. We are in favor of protecting freedom of speech and freedom of association. We think that this bill provides some excellent protections as a preemptive and presumptive, and sets a standard in which government is expected to respect freedom of speech, and that includes the donors of individual organizations. For without money, without donors, there is no free speech unless you're standing on the corner and want to just yell at people. It's critical to be able to raise money to exercise free speech in a modern society. We are very thankful for this, and we are in full support. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Chair, there are no more callers on the line to provide support testimony at this time.
I think at this time we'll go ahead and invite anyone wishing to testify in opposition to AB 258. We'll go ahead and begin here in Carson City.
Good morning, Chair Torres, members of the committee. For the record, David Cherry, Government Affairs Manager for the City of Henderson. I've also been asked today by the City of Reno to speak on behalf of their legislative relations staff. I want to thank the bill sponsor for allowing me to briefly outline the city's concerns with AB 258 via email prior to today's hearing, which addresses the bill as introduced, not the amendments offered. These include the Section 2 requirements to maintain certain information as confidential that could potentially interfere with the ability for local officials to comply with ethics requirements and with local government's ability to vet businesses and organizations that may seek contracts or funding or just want to participate in civic events. As an example would be if we needed to determine if a city council member or mayor has a potential conflict of interest due to their involvement with a nonprofit entity or other 501c entity. The bill would restrict the ability for staff to ask businesses or contractors about their donations or non-financial contributions to nonprofits, and would further prohibit disclosure of this information even in a public meeting where the elected official would be asked to take action that would warrant a disclosure statement. Even more concerning are Sections 4 and 5 of the bill, which are invitations to litigation. Section 4 allows any party to sue a government or an individual officer or employee of that entity personally, even when the person suing has no connection to the information released. This could create a bounty system where suits are filed seeking a payday and further risk becoming a tool for harassment against governments and their workers. Employees would be on the hook personally for court costs, attorney's fees, and damages that they would be forced to pay out of pocket, even when they were just following the orders of a supervisor who directed them to share information. Section 5 is even more concerning as it would subject individual employees to criminal penalties, including up to 90 days in jail or a $1,000 fine. And that is on top of the thousands of dollars they could already owe from a civil case involving the same release of information. This threat could lead employees asking to be removed from duties where they would face this liability, making it harder to fill jobs. Finally, the definitions in the bill are so broad that they seemingly make an email where a coworker said they wanted to buy a box of Girl Scout cookies or given $10 for a high school band trip a confidential record, or if they were participating in a shimmy contest fundraiser. And if that email was shared or provided as part of a public records request, then a city and or its employees could be sued. That's because the bill makes confidential without limitation any data of any kind that directly or indirectly identifies a person as a donor of financial but also non-financial support or as a member or volunteer. Does that mean if city staff posts a photo of someone marching in a parade with a nonprofit, they could now be sued in violation of AB 258 or for sending out an email thanking volunteers from a local nonprofit organization who helped in the neighborhood cleanup effort? This bill is too broad, its language too vague, and its penalties too severe, and it places local governments in a catch-22, caught between the requirement to provide public records under penalty of law while also risking being sued for releasing that same information. We need to guard against unintended consequences given that this is public records. This is the chapter on public records that we're talking about amending. In our reading is that this bill is going to require litigation to sort out at the end of the day. While attempting to solve for a problem that the proponents have acknowledged does not yet exist in Nevada, you are opening up a public records Pandora's box. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Stephen Wood, for the record, representing the Nevada League of Cities and Municipalities. First, I would like to say that we, of course, appreciate the intent of this bill and all the work that the sponsor has done. However, I do need to echo the concerns that Mr. Cherry just brought up to the committee. We have real concerns about the broadness of the language, especially as was brought up during the hearing, Section 2, Subsection 4, and the potential for endless litigation. We support the idea of protecting privacy, of course, but we have concerns about implementation and the unintended consequences of this bill. This bill also has the potential to be especially burdensome for local governments and small communities who have limited staff and resources. So we look forward to continued work and bringing local governments to the table for the conversations, and we will shimmy our way into those conversations.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, Mindy Elliott with Flynn Judici Government Affairs, representing the city of Fernley. For many of you that know me, I am involved in a lot of nonprofit organizations a lot, and could appreciate the robust conversation as it relates to this bill. I think that from the perspective of the city of Fernley, there is concern as they are involved in a lot of nonprofits, and they use their government email address to communicate with groups and constituents. And there are certainly provisions of this bill that we don't want unforeseen consequences. Curious as to some of the penalties as it relates to this bill. We have an ethics commission process. Why isn't that part of this discussion as it relates to elected officials? We do have a process already in place. We appreciate the intent of the bill, and we certainly appreciate Assemblywoman Backus and Assemblywoman Kasama bringing this bill forward, and we look forward to further robust conversations with the bill sponsors. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to testify in opposition to AB 258 here in Carson City? Not seeing anyone. Is there anyone in Las Vegas? When you're ready, please begin. This is opposition. So I guess BPS will go to the line. Is there anyone wishing to testify in opposition to AB 258?
Chair, the line is open and working, but we have no callers for opposition of AB 258 at this time.
Is there anyone wishing to testify neutral to AB 258? Not seeing any in Carson City. Is there anyone in Las Vegas? It appears there is. Please testify when you're ready.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Ross Armstrong, Executive Director of the Nevada Commission on Ethics. We're neutral on the bill. I did want to thank Assemblywoman Backus for listening to some of the parts about the ethics law. It's been commented a lot today. The Nevada ethics law currently requires public officers and employees to disclose in certain circumstances their private interests when it comes in, like when it collides with their public duties. In addition, public officers and employees are not allowed to benefit in an unwarranted way their own private interests, which can include membership or being on the board of a nonprofit. The Ethics Commission has found that in prior cases. And so we appreciate the language of the amendment that allows the ethics law to still operate, so we have transparency in government. And then I will just say in closing, I have looked at the ethics law, and although we don't prejudge any cases, the shimmying is completely allowed under the ethics law. But if you have additional questions about that, we have an advisory opinion process where you can request additional clarification.
Thank you, members. Any questions? Thank you for shimmying your way up to the dais. All right, next.
My name is Cami Dempsey, K-A-M-I, last name D-E-M-P-S-E-Y. I'm representing the Nevada Press Association. And again, I too want to reiterate the support of not only the Assemblywoman, but also of Martin and Eric, who we've had many discussions with in terms of trying to address some of the ideas that we want to protect too in this bill. We want to be sure that there's not unintended consequences, which I think has been mentioned several times, and I think even Mr. Cherry just mentioned it in his hearing. But as governments lean on more nonprofit organizations, providing them taxpayer dollars to provide needed services that maybe the agencies themselves can't provide, we want to be sure that the public information that should be public remains public. There have been certain circumstances in the past where if there has been elected officials part of a board and money has been going to that organization, basically the media has been cut off from accessing the information that would normally be public. So I know that there's a provision where we can challenge it legally to gain access, but that could be really expensive for a lot of research investigations and also just newspaper publications providing information to the public. So thank you, and I look forward to working with them more on settling the concerns.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to testify neutral to AB 258? Not seeing any here in Carson City or in Las Vegas. PPS, is there anyone on the line wishing to testify neutral to AB 258?
Chair, the line is open and working, but we have no callers for neutral of AB 258 at this time.
Thank you. At this time, we'll go ahead and invite the bill sponsors. Any closing remarks?
Martin Fitzgerald for the record. I want to thank everyone in the committee's time today and look forward to working with everyone offline to continue to address any questions related to the bill and to the opposition to hear productive feedback on what exactly they're interested in changing. I will say, as we've heard from the supporters, it's important to protect people's fundamental constitutional rights to both free speech and privacy. And I think the penalties are important because without penalties, the law is a fig leaf. And so working to make sure that there aren't any unintended consequences and we're more memorializing current practices is important. But I do think we need to have penalties for unscrupulous office holders. And with that, we thank the committee for their time.
Thank you. At this time, we'll go ahead and close the hearing on AB 258. The next on our agenda is public comment. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to testify in public comment? I don't see any here in Carson City. Is there anyone in Las Vegas? Not seeing any on Las Vegas. BPS, is there anyone on the line wishing to testify in public comment?
Chair, the line is open and working, but we have no callers for public comment at this time.
Members, any additional remarks? Assemblyman MacArthur, do you want to shimmy up to your mic and say anything? Not today. All right, he's fine. For just a note to the public and members of the committee, we have changed our start time to tomorrow for 8 a.m. There is a National Guard, I think it's a helicopter tour that several members would like to attend, so it requires us to meet a little bit earlier. So we will be in room 4100 at 8 a.m. and we'll be hearing 2 bills. Anything else? All right, it looks like Assemblyman MacArthur's good. He said we can adjourn, so at this time the meeting is adjourned.